You here. Oh, and a reminder, go ahead and post any questions in the chat if you want to. I will read those, or feel free to unmute and clarify any questions that you might have, because we are an informal group here. But here you go, Diane. First one I got for you says, I was curious about some best end-of-life practices to use when your product becomes antiquated or too expensive to produce. How do you wrap those things up?
How do you wrap those up? And that's, it's one of those questions. It's really important, but sometimes it can be a very awkward part of a business, because sometimes we hang on to those products too long. And I guess my first advice to anybody who's got a product in that situation, or that might be in that situation, is don't fight it, embrace it, and make a plan to get it through its end of life, because it's not about us or the product itself. It really is about the market and its needs. So if we're solving problems for the market, and the market either no longer has that problem, or they want to solve that problem a different way, then understand that there's very little we can do to change that. All we can do is solve the problem the way they want it solved going forward. So it doesn't mean that what you built was bad. It doesn't mean that what you built is wrong, but we definitely want to embrace that. So how do you embrace that? One of the things that might surprise you is raising the price. So if you've ever taken, for those of you who've taken price class, you've actually seen that product life cycle, and the thing that we talk about, which is at the end of the life of a product, raise the price. Go beyond willingness to pay it. As a matter of fact, what you might have ever thought willingness to pay would be, which seems kind of crazy, because, well, if nobody really wants this anymore, why would we raise the price? The reason is because the people who want to stay with that don't like change. And so that's why we advise raising the price, especially if it's getting more and more expensive to create the product. So consider raising your price. Also, that will help you with your finance department, who probably doesn't want you cannibalizing something that's already declining. But you probably have to, because if your market is moving away from this product, it's like I said, it's either because they no longer have that problem, or because they want to solve it a different way. So you've got to start turning your attention to some of those growth mode products. And that can be difficult, especially if this was a big cash cow, something that everybody loved and it made a lot of money. So use this price increase and start working with finance to talk about the fact that, yes, we're going to cannibalize this thing, but if we don't, somebody else will. So make a plan. This is really hard for publicly held companies to do. It's easier if you're on your own, frankly, because it's easier to go get funding to do that. But it is important to just look it in the eye. It's coming, it's going to happen. Raise the price, and then make a plan to fill that hole.
Yeah. Vishal, thank you for your question. I'm going to get to that one next, but we had such a good follow-up to what Diane was just saying that I want to ask this one too. We are planning on raising the price of one of our newest products. So this isn't end of life, this is new. We're going to raise the price on one of our newest product features, and I was wondering if you had some suggestions on how to best communicate this to the customers. How do you tell them?
Well, how do you tell them? That's one of the most difficult things to do. How do we tell the market that we're raising the price? One of the things you said in that question, so I'm going to assume a couple things, and if it's not right, just let me know. But I'm assuming that you did some market research, and we understand that you're solving a problem that the market wants solved. So if you've actually gone out and you know the market wants this problem solved, then you should be able to rationalize the price increase because you understand that it solves a problem that they need solved. That's actually one of the reasons why we put urgent, pervasive, and willing to pay right up front in the mandatory filters. Because if the market isn't willing to and that we can solve it for less, then we shouldn't be in the business at all. So I'm assuming that that all happened. If it did, then the first thing to do is remind them of that. Remind them if you've got case studies, if you've got testimonials, if you've got win-loss interviews that you did to discover this knowledge, or even user interviews. So if you found this someplace, if you identified it in the market, use that as part of your go-to-market strategy. So 50% of you have been asking for this as your number one concern, or whatever's the truth. Take it out there and talk about how important it was to them. Focus on marketing it to the people who found it most important. If your whole market doesn't find this thing important, then you might want to consider not raising your prices with everybody. The way to do that is to version your product. So again, if you've taken price class, we talked about versioning. Some people have a higher willingness to pay than others in different market segments. So if you know that's the case, then maybe make a version with this new attribute, this new problem that you solve, and then keep a version that doesn't solve that problem. That way you can really justify charging more to the people who are willing to pay more, but also don't force the other people to make an awkward decision if they're not willing to pay more. The only thing I would do there is I would keep one code base. Especially obviously if we're talking about a software product, don't build two code bases. Just turn features off and on that solve different problems. You don't have to raise prices on everybody all at once. This might be a very good time to raise prices on existing customers because they've been looking for this feature. Maybe this is a good time to raise your entry price, but not raise the price on your existing customers. That's something you should know based on how many contracts do you have coming due, how happy your market is with you, how much competition you have in both of those spots. But those are the things that I would be thinking about.
Excellent. All right. Vishal says, if I am seeking to obtain a true product role, shall I focus on other types of training such as intro to AI, blockchain, influencing, business analytics, UX, etc., from online course engines, or should I pursue Pragmatic certification? I think I know the answer to the last part of his question, but I'll let you take the beginning, Diane.
Can we do a chorus on the last one? I think we can.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. Should we pursue Pragmatic certification? 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Oh yes. All the people
absolutely.
that were unmuted, which was you and me. That was nice.
That's right. That's good. So it is a really good question, Vishal, and it depends on when you say true product role. Our titles are messy. And so when I see you say true product role, what I think of is a product manager or market strategist. If you're thinking about a product owner role in an agile shop, scrum shop, then that is a slightly different thing. It is more technical facing. You're interpreting the market needs with the development team. And so it's much more focused on making sure that they understand the context in which they build. But if you're talking about that market strategist, yeah, the simple answer is, of course, come and get certified at Pragmatic. I would recommend for a true product role, all of the courses, including the business of data science. You mentioned that here. You talk about UX and analytics. I would say analytics in general, having a clear understanding of how to gather information, how to analyze information. You don't have to be a mathematician. You don't have to be a business analyst or a UX expert, but your job is to be the messenger of the market, which means you have to gather all the, find patterns in it, make sure that you validate that knowledge. So be very skeptical and be able to analyze and dig deeper, prioritizing that analysis. You can't do it all at once. You can't do it all ever. So some of the things you've mentioned here, like training on analytics, having a working knowledge of machine learning, business knowledge only. Unless you're going to be an analyst or a data scientist, you just need to have a working knowledge to tell them what you need and to make sure you can validate that they got the sources, that they got the information in a good way. Blockchain, honestly, any sort of technology, I would say I would leave that to my engineers only because that's what they do. Having a working knowledge of many of these things from a business perspective, always wise. But getting too much knowledge is going to tempt you to take over their job, which is going to end up having you not do your own. So I would say, know how to listen, know how to aggregate knowledge, know how to find patterns and validate patterns that you've discovered. Take courses that are going to help you become passionately dispassionate. Take finance courses because you're going to need to justify ideas based in financial terms, because in order to get budget and know whether you've succeeded in an organization, you're going to want to know about that. So if you're talking about that market strategist, you are the messenger of the market, you are understanding the problems, bringing them in, that's what I would advise.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So like
Hey,
finance courses, market sizing courses, stuff like that.
yeah, I would take those. I would definitely understand. I would take a business of data science class. Certainly, ours is great and our guys are great. So obviously, shameless plug for us, but anything you find on that is great.
Cool.
There are lots of great meetups for product too, where you can learn a lot. If you go to Product Camp or, there are several. As a matter of fact, if you just Google that in town, you're in Chicago, right, Vishal?
Oh, that's the problem. I live in Arkansas right now in Chicago due to COVID. I
Ah,
recently found out about Product Camp. So
yeah,
the nearest Product Camp would be St. Louis, which would be 5 hours. So that's fine. I'll do it. So
yeah,
my issue is I'm stuck in Arkansas where there's nothing.
yeah. That's unfortunate because you're right. Um, it's a challenge. There are a lot more virtual events than there have been. I would explore Product Camp virtual events. I don't know for sure if they're having anything. We definitely are. I mean, obviously, this is a great thing to do because you get to talk to other people, talk to us. So keep coming to these. Dive in a little bit if you have budget, and you could consider joining the alumni group. It's very vibrant right now. A lot of people talking, a lot of different groups going on. It is a paid service though, so I want to let you know that.
To join the Pragmatic Institute alumni service, you're saying, even though I've not taken any Pragmatic certifications?
If you haven't taken well, I don't know, guys. I'm assuming the alumni is open to only alumni, correct?
I would assume.
Yeah. So you do need to take at
Okay.
least one course, but you don't need to have
Right.
taken all the courses, just one.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Vishal. Good question.
Thank you.
We did have, of course, this week, lots of our submitted questions were surrounding situations with COVID-19. This one kind of sums up a few of them for us. It says, the pandemic is causing our company to lose time and resources at an alarming rate. Our roadmap is basically obsolete. How can I shift roadmap priorities and strategy to reflect the current state of things? Diane.
Oh boy, and we all feel that pain. I mean, we have all been going through that, haven't we? I've done a couple interviews with some former colleagues of mine. As a matter of fact, talking about this, I have a friend who consults to the pharma industry, and then I have another one who consults to subscription businesses. So pretty much everything from subscription boxes to online data and analytics, and have heard some really interesting things. Mostly what I'm hearing, and my recommendation would be just go back to the basics. They will serve you well at any time, and that is talk to your market. Get out and talk to the market, ask what they're doing, what their biggest problems are now, bring the knowledge back. It's a really good time to talk to people because they are thinking about what's happening to them right now. How are their businesses changing? Because this happened to everybody. It was a roadmap out the window. Some businesses much more than others, but it happened to everybody in your market too. So go out and ask them. If you can, ask them some specific questions. So maybe read up a little bit on what's going on in the market. Take a look at what they read, their journals, their associations, if you can. Get the chatter first so you've got some idea of how they're all feeling. And then also ask them about the future, because we're all very in this moment right now, which has been really interesting. That's a Chinese curse. May live in interesting times, but it has been very interesting. Ask them what they think they're going to change because of this, but what they also hope and believe is going to go back to normal. I know those are some of the questions we've been asking people, and it's just like everything else. This market research, this market knowledge, go out and discover. When you find a pattern, stop and validate. Talking to your market is always the best thing to do, and right now is no different.
Back to the basics. Don't forget those basics.
It's really, I mean, it seems awfully simple, but now more than ever is the time, because things are changing. A lot, this is something I talk about a lot in class. Market research shouldn't be an event. Market research shouldn't be, we did a survey, now we're going to act, or we had a focus group, now we're going to do this. We should be gathering this knowledge on an ongoing basis from multiple sources, and we should be able to see some changes coming. This is one very, very difficult to have seen coming. I will say there's an article out though, and I need to find out exactly who published this, so forgive me, I can't recall. It was about a grocery store here in Texas called HEB. And HEB, it was a fairly long article. And I think if you look for it, it's maybe HEB response to COVID-19, and it's just the letters HEB. It was one of the best articles I've seen on a company that is listening to its markets, listening to its supply chain, which of course is international, even though it's a statewide grocery store. It walked through how they started to hear about COVID-19 and what they did to make decisions that they made. It's certainly, it's obviously a grocery store, but it's very interesting to watch how they did this, because it talks about how they listened to the market, how they validated what they ought to do about things that were starting to happen, even though it was totally unexpected, really fast. And if anybody got blown up by this, it was the supply chain and the grocery industry. I mean, we all know how that's been. So I would recommend going out there, and what I will do, folks, is I will try to, I'll look up the URL for that, and I can send it to Callie and Eddie, and we can get it out to you if you're interested. But I thought it was
Very cool.
fascinating.
Very cool. Thank you. How about this one, Diane? How can I be sure my value propositions remain differentiated from amongst my competitors?
Oh, that's a really good one. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you. When we think about our value proposition being differentiated, I will tell you, for a few years, I did some consulting, and a lot of it was go-to-market consulting. A lot of it was rebooting products that should have been doing well, that weren't doing very well. And one of the things I used to do when I would go into these engagements was I would ask my clients to tell me who their top competitors were. And sometimes I knew and sometimes I didn't, but they would tell me one or two different companies. And what I would do is I would take the materials from usually the competition's website. So whether it was sell sheets or just the web pages themselves, I would take those and I would take my clients and I would do what I call debadge those. So I would take the name of the company, the name of the product, I would take all that off. And then I would just look at the content to see if the companies were actually different enough that I could make a decision as a client based on cues that I saw in the material. Why was somebody better? Most of the time, it was almost exactly the same. There was no compelling difference between one competitor and another, including the client that I had. I won't obviously say who this was, but I actually had a client who freely admitted to me they had copied the content from their competition's website, which really isn't a good idea, just period, for a lot of reasons. But you could see it in the content. And I mean, so you talk about not being differentiated. That's the end result of not having talked to the market. So one of the things you can do is if you've got this market research and you understand what your distinctive competencies are. So distinctive competencies probably sounds familiar to those of you who've taken foundations class, hopefully. What you need to find out is, what are you better at than the competition's good at? So what are you the one, this is what you're known for. And I will give you a hint, it might not be your product. If we look around, and I didn't really realize this when I was out in the field, but 95% of what many of our products do, if we have competition, 95% of it is the same as the competition. So what is it that's different about us? Find out what that is by validating it in the market, because it can't just be something that's different. It also has to be something that they find valuable. So something that's different, that your market finds valuable, that's hard to copy. Not impossible, but hard to copy. Those three elements together gives you a distinctive competency. And you can find that out through win-loss interviews and talking to the market. One of the best questions to ask them to find that out: why did you choose us? If you had to pick one reason why you chose us, what was the one reason? Ask your users, what's the one thing that stands out about us that you really love? If it's a loss, of course, you ask the opposite question. But find out what it is. I found out at one company, and I knew this going into the job I took, the software in this particular company was not as good as the competition. It was a payment software. Basically, it was rights brokerage. The product wasn't as good. And I'll tell you, 3 years after I left, or 3 years into the job, and then I left shortly after those 3 years, the product still wasn't quite as good as the competition, but we were winning deals because we knew copyright. Now, let's face it, copyright, one of those topics, I'm saying copyright. How many of you are violently interested in copyright? Hands?
No
Truthfully,
hands,
no,
no
come on.
hands going up.
No hands. I'm shocked. Seriously, nobody is. Nobody wants to be. It's something that's, and it's very convoluted and difficult to understand. But if you have to know it, or you need somebody to know it, it just so happened this company I worked for really knew it well. And there were some people who actually said, you know what, we know you know it, so we get that your payments and your brokerage software isn't the best, but we just feel comfortable selling rights through you because we know you're not going to get us in trouble. And so it might be something like that. It might be expertise. It might be that you are more pleasant to deal with. I was actually on the wrong end of that once. I worked for an enormous company that built software and services for lawyers and law firms. And right before a big meeting, we were losing deals in the small law firm market. So 1 attorney to 10 attorneys. We were losing deals big time. We were trying to figure out why. And my team was heading this, and we were going to do this big report to this executive meeting, huge executive meeting. And it was primarily this one other company. I mean, it was us and this other enormous company. And what we found out was that one of these companies was considered the nice company. And it wasn't us. I mean, like, really not at all. We did a word cloud based on the survey and the comments that we received back during this research. And the word, you've seen these word clouds that show the biggest words because those came up the most. The biggest word in our word cloud was jerk.
Ouch.
Ouch. I am not kidding. Jerks. And so here we are 2 days before this meeting, and my team, we can't put this up. We can't put this up. It's the executive team. It's our CEO. Like, what are we going to do? We have to put it up. It's the truth. What are we going to do? We ended up putting it up, and that's where we stopped. That's what we talked about for the next hour was, why are we the jerks? You don't know what it is that makes you different. So first of all, go find out what's different, because once you discover what that is, the next step is, how do we build an entire communication ecosystem around that benefit? I've actually advised clients in the past, if the best thing about you is your implementations are so smooth, figure out a way to work it into your product demo. That Callie Frisbee had a problem. She needed to get this software installed immediately, or her salespeople weren't going to make quota. Figure out a way to work it into everything. Make sure that you highlight and shore that up. But you do have to go out to the market and make sure it's something they find valuable. And it's something that you actually are doing better than the competition. They might be doing it, but you're really seen as the ones who do this very, very well.
My takeaway there is that there's such a thing as distinctive incompetencies as well.
Yeah.
I guess. How about that?
Yeah, actually, it turned out after I left that company, because they were really jerks. I worked for a different company where we bought and sold data, did a lot of deals with both of those companies. And honestly, the other company was the nice company, gave them better deals. They got their data first. We were more flexible with them. You never know what it is until you actually ask the market and find out.
I'm gonna change gears on you, Diane. I've got a good one here about naming. Oh, just a reminder to everybody, don't be shy. Post questions in the chat if you want to read them out. We've got plenty of pre-submitted ones here as well, so you'll definitely get your money's worth if you just listen, but we love to hear from you as long as you're here as well. How about this one, Diane? We are in the process of naming a new product, but with legal stakeholders and everyone else having an opinion, we aren't making much headway. Any suggestions on how to generate naming ideas that will satisfy all involved? So please tell us how to satisfy all the people all the time, Diane.
Yeah, never going to happen. It is so difficult to do that. I mean, I so many scary stories. Actually, the company I just talked about, the rights brokerage company, the guy before me lost his job because he named a product Fried Rights.
Fried Rights?
Yeah, because it was, remember, copyright rights brokerage, so publishers buying and selling rights to things. Fried Rights. That's basically why he lost his job. Naming can be a big deal in companies. So the first thing to do is take the concerns of the legal department seriously, take the concerns of the internal stakeholders seriously. One thing I would not do internally or externally is vote. So one thing not to do is don't vote. But you can test names, and we talk about this a lot in class. That is the beauty of this constant dialogue with the market, is you can test everything, including names. Anytime you get pushback inside the company, bring data in from outside the company. If you're truly the messenger of the market, it is really hard to push back on you. If you're the one who's got all that data, and you can come back and say, we've done some tests in the market, we've done some research, and this seems to be resonating with the market. That's one thing that you can bring back that helps. The other thing that you can bring back that helps is your positioning document. So if you've distilled down, you've done that crystallization of what the problem is and who has it in the market, what's the pain they're feeling, and what does solved look like. If you walk everybody who's going to be part of that stakeholder group through that process, it becomes easier to create a name. It's still not going to be easy. And one of the things that will always be true is everybody will hate the name until you get it out there. And then if you try to change the name, everybody will love the name. So maybe the best thing about naming is to name a product and then pretend you're going to rename it, because then everybody will love whatever name it's already on. But in all seriousness, use those things. The other thing from the legal perspective is, and I made this mistake once with a project name inside the company. I made up a project name that I thought might be a good name out in the market, but I had done no research at all. I sat at my desk, I made this name up, and one of the people on the internal team said, "You do know that that's just almost exactly what the competitor calls this other product?" And I said, "Oh yeah, but we're not going to go to market with it." Well, that was a rookie mistake, and happily one I didn't make again, because we ended up getting a call from the company that said, "I don't know if you're thinking of going to market with this name, but don't." So that was not good.
Wow.
Google the name.
Ah.
Even just something as simple as Google the names you like, because you might get out there and find out not that the competition has the name. That's usually pretty obvious. I mean, this was a pretty bad rookie mistake. But you might find all sorts of scary things. When I worked for a company, I worked for Copyright Clearance Center. So it was one of the rights companies I worked for. I actually worked for a couple. Yeah, seriously, I did multiple rights brokerage stints. Feel very sorry for me. But anyway, the name was too long, and I was working with my CEO. We were trying to figure out what we could do. She was really reluctant to change the name. We ended up not. But she said, "Couldn't we just call ourselves CCC?" And I said, "Well, let's Google CCC, because that doesn't sound like, well, what could possibly be wrong with that?" Well, nothing was really wrong with it, except the first names that came up were Continental Can Company, which I believe has been out of business since 1972. They might be back. Then there was the Civil Conservation Corps, which was a Depression era initiative, federal initiative in the US. And then there was this really terrifying group that we didn't want anybody thinking we were, that called themselves CCC. So even if it's not a competitor name, even if you think it's something that's totally safe, always Google it. Put money aside in the budget to do a copyright, trademark search, because these are the things your legal department's worried about. Respect that, but if there's no trademark issue, if there's no scary other company name, then to the degree that you can influence that should be the beginning and end of their involvement in the name, because they've got another role to play, which is making sure that you're not infringing on trademark.
I got a good comment from Steve here with some tips on naming. Hi, Steve. Good to see you again.
Steve.
Steve says naming is always political. Good point. The ideal name is based on the positioning, just like you were saying, and then it should be meaningful and unique and easy to spell. Thank you.
Easy to spell. That is, I totally agree. And it's political and it's emotional. It's a difficult thing to navigate inside a company. But I really do agree with all those things that Steve said. And also you reminded me of something, Steve, which is, I prefer names that are descriptive, because any name that is very creative. And I think of the difference between Uber and Lyft. Now, both of those very successful companies. Uber, though, was a creative name. Lyft was much more descriptive. Any name that's very creative, you're going to have to fill with meaning, which usually means you've got to fill it with cash. It's really difficult to create that recognition in a name. Uber spent a fortune doing it. So if you've got that kind of budget, great. If you don't, then a descriptive name is going to be better than a highly creative name because it's just really expensive to gain that recognition.
Yeah, as much as you want that clever name.
Yeah, and I love them too. I really do. But that's a piece of discipline that I actually embraced.
Here you go, Diane. I'm going to sneak in a couple extra questions because we lost a few minutes to our technical difficulties here. But so I'm going to keep plowing here. How about this one? In doing win-loss analysis, what do you think are some of the most important questions that we should be asking?
Oh boy, and win-loss analysis is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Win-loss analysis is one of my very best, or my very favorite discovery methods. So, really the questions themselves are going to be fairly specific based on industry. But what I will say is ask questions that document the buying process. So one of my very favorite things to share with teams is we tend to think about the selling process. So we tend to think about how our sales team sold, or the attributes or the assets that we had, our ROI calculator, our sell sheets. Those are all good questions to ask, but most of us think about those. The ones that when I was in the field with my own teams, what I usually found that we weren't asking were the initializing questions. So there's two pieces that I would ask. One of them is right at the beginning. How did you know you had a problem? When did you know? Who was it who knew? So was there an event that made you realize this happened? Or did you always know you were going to want to do something about this challenge someday? What made you decide now is the time to do it? This is one of those things that the software and services for lawyers and law firms, one of the things that we discovered during this process was trying to sell things to small law firms, solo law practitioners, one lawyer, maybe one paralegal. It was really difficult, but we were trying to figure out, well, when do they start buying software? Workflow enablement software, time and billing software, case management software. When do they start? And we were able to find out the answer by asking them the question, like, why did you start looking now? What made you decide to look? And they said, well, it got to the point we were big enough, we just needed to. Well, how many attorneys was that? It turned out there was a real obvious position, 5 attorneys in a firm. Not employees, but attorneys, 5 attorneys in a firm. That was the time when they started considering buying enablement software. And that was an easy thing for us to know because that was something we were always watching, how, what was changing in law firms. It was something knowable that could tell us, don't market to them until they're this big. But as soon as they have 5 attorneys, how long do you know you have a problem before you solve it? And what's that initializer that makes you start shopping? That's the piece that I found really valuable that a lot of people weren't doing in my world. The next piece that I would say is we always ask people what their role was in the buying process. We don't always see ourselves clearly. Ask other people what they thought the other people's buying role was. So if you're talking to the head of finance, well, so what was the role of the product manager in this process? What was the role of the sales manager? What was the role of IT? Ask everybody what everybody else's role was, and you'll get a clearer, more robust picture. Those are the 2 big things that were missing most consistently in the places that I went and implemented this.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap us up. If you had more questions and you just didn't get them out, of course, join us again next time. We're going to do this again. Our AMA series happens every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you can take advantage of these great instructors who are a treasure trove of knowledge. If you can't wait that long, if you just miss Pragmatic so much, you can't wait a week, you can join us Tuesday, June 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for our continuing product chat series. This time, we will be learning about the topic leadership in this time of crisis. We will have with us Dr. John J. Shearer. He's the creator of the Adventus Initiative, which aims to provide leaders with practical tools for embracing uncertainty and finding new ways of doing things and getting them done. Don't miss that one. It's going to blow your mind a little bit, I think. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a fantastic weekend, everybody. We'll see you again next time.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here today.